Hello, everyone. This is the Commissar here, and today we have another Imperial Knights video, but this one is a little bit different from the other videos. This will be more about strategy and tactics. So what we have here in front of us is a heavily marked up GW Terrain 8. And what I set up is how your board should look after the first couple turns. So this is just one of 8 GW maps. There are other maps available, but depending on the event that you're going to, they will tell you what format, what terrain and deployment you'll be getting at the event. So, for everyone who's interested in competitive play, I recommend that you do something like this with your own units and with the correct terrain, deployment, and format with the mission pack that you'll be playing. But for other people who are just getting started doing this, I'll break down what I have here and explain why I have it. So, starting from the bottom, because it's simplest, we have a measurement of 9 inches. And I marked this up using Bluebeam because it's construction software and I'm a contractor for my regular job. And so I'm most familiar with Bluebeam. I know other people use different software, but this was easiest for me. So anyway, we marked out 9 inches away from each deployment zone because that's where the opponents and you cannot drop your infiltrators during deployment. It doesn't really matter for what we have shown here, but in the next slide, I'll explain it a little bit more in detail. We have 1 inches right here, and that's because there's a strategy where you stay 1 inch, a little tiny bit more than 1 inch away from the wall. And the reason why you do that is because engagement range is 1 inch. So you're staying out of the enemy's engagement range, but you're close enough to the wall so they can't just charge through the wall. You have to end your move outside of engagement range. So the closest they would be able to end their move is on the opposing side of the wall. When the enemy charges in, they can only attack you with units that have based you or units that are in base-to-base contact with another unit that has based you. So this means that the opponent can only attack you with one model along that line, and only if their bases fit. So this is a good way, staying 1 inch away from the wall, to prevent these Skitarii Rangers from getting destroyed in melee. Now, the Ranger unit I have at the bottom is a standard Skitarii Ranger unit with a 6-inch scout move. I have not attached a tech priest to them, so they get the 6-inch scout move. So I've marked out 12 inches here, which is exactly their scout move and their normal move of 6 inches. So they can almost get within 1 inch, and they can advance because they are so close that if they advance, then they can all get into position in this formation. And why I have one unit at the top and bottom is due to unit coherency. A Skitarii Ranger unit is exactly 10 models, starting strength. And so in the beginning, the units at the end have to be within 2 inches of another unit. And so this is called dog boning, and it's a pretty common tactic to string out units. And as you can see, all the Skitarii Ranger models are on the objective. So currently, there are 20 OC, objective control points, on the southern objective. There are not a lot of opponents that can place units and out OC it, especially because most of the marker is on my side, and my side is the green side. If you start on the red side, then it's pretty much symmetrical. So you would just mirror image this if you start on the red side. So why I say the red side is a stronger side for the enemy is because this ruin is towards the enemy's direction, so they can put units wholly within this ruin and they won't get shot from any of my units on the green side. And since this is the stronger side for the enemy in the south, that's why I put my Skitarii Rangers, just a single unit of 85 points there to contest that objective and prevent them from crossing the wall, because infantry can walk through walls and destroying the unit. So if I'm placed this way, the opponent will have to go around, and if they go around, we have an Armiger Warglaive here and the Knight Valiant. The Knight Valiant has the ability in the Quester Forge Pack detachment to use Overwatch with one of his weapons, which is most likely going to be the Conflagration Cannon, which is a 3d6 attack torrent weapon that ignores cover, which means it auto hits when you're using Overwatch. And it covers all the way over here. So if the opponent decides that he's going to walk through the north side of the ruin and come around to take the southern objective and attack the Rangers, the Valiant can just Overwatch and hopefully minimize the damage that the Rangers will take. So on the left side, we have two Helverins here. And the reason why we place the Helverins here is that these orange lines here are their firing lanes. So the blue stuff here are 2-inch terrain features. And so the Helverin can fire through them. Now the enemy will get benefit of cover, but it still allows the Helverins to fire in the firing lanes that I marked out. And so if an opponent does decide to take the southern objective, once they cross that wall, they can get hit by a lot of my units. This area right here is a very dangerous place for the enemy because nearly my entire army has line of sight there. The Skitarii can attack you, the Skitarii in the middle can attack you. I believe both Helverins, if they move, can fire at this location. The Warglaive can fire here and then charge in later. The Valiant can fire here too. So other than the Acheron at the north side, my entire army can fire on this position in the south. So one of the benefits of placing the Helverins here, other than the firing lane, is deep strike screening. The home objective will be stickied by the Rangers, and they're going to move out to the midboard. And so the objective will be stickied. I'll be getting victory points every single turn for it, unless the enemy deep strikes into it and steals it. And so the Helverins here, they both have overlapping 9-inch circles here, and that means that no enemy can deep strike onto the home objective and steal it. Now, they can deep strike into these small areas in the corners that are not covered by the Helverins, but most deep strikers, if they deep strike there, they won't be doing much of anything other than Eldari and other shoot and scoot units. They can deep strike in the little areas that are not covered by the Helverins. They can shoot at the Helverins, and even if they don't kill the Helverins, they can just scoot onto the objective and steal it, which is one drawback to playing knights. However, next turn, the Helverins can shoot them off the objectives, or one of the Helverins can shoot them off the objective, and then just take the objective back. Maybe the enemy doesn't place their units well, and the Helverins can just move a little bit outside of 1 inch from them and already put OC on the objective while staying out of engagement range. They can blast the opponent off the objective. And if they can't, they can charge in and attack in melee. They're not the best in melee, but they can also tank shock. And that should be able to clear off most deep strikers with a shoot and scoot. And so that's pretty much my strategy for ensuring that I keep my home objective and I keep those victory points flowing in. So now in the mid board, we have the Valiant, which is placed on the objective somewhere near the middle of the board. In this strategy, it doesn't matter where exactly he is. What does matter is that he's behind the unit of Skitarii Rangers led by the Tech Priest Dominus, and that he's within 3 inches of the Tech Priest Dominus so that any ranged attacks that do come in can get repaired by the detachment rule next turn. So if you have a Tech Priest, the detachment rule says you can repair up to D3 wounds in your command phase, I believe. And so he could be repairing anywhere from 1 to 3 wounds, which is not a lot, but due to his insane amount of toughness, he's toughness 13 with a base 24 wounds, and you can put Omniscion Champion on him for an extra 4 wounds, and he gets a 5+ invulnerable save against ranged attacks, which means anything with high AP, like any last cannon shots that might hit, he still has 1/3 of a chance in range to protect himself from taking damage. And if they have any dev wounds attacks, this detachment does have a stratagem that gives knights a 5+ feel no pain against mortal wounds. And so for 1 CP, you could also use that defensive stratagem. So it's not really a risk or a problem keeping the Valiant in the middle. In fact, it makes your strategy and your army a lot stronger because he has an insane radius of threat of firing Overwatch. And that stratagem is called Thronegeist Fury, and it costs 1 CP. So we have the two Warglaves right here. We have one near the north and one near the south. They are there to protect the Valiant from getting rushed in melee. There is an area right behind the Valiant where really fast enemy units with flying could tag the Valiant in melee, but it's highly unlikely that most armies have multiple copies of high movement flying units that are just going to rush in and attack the Valiant. So in that case, if that does happen, it doesn't really matter that much as long as the Valiant doesn't die. And if he does die, well, the opponent is placed right here. That means that one of the Helverins can go a little bit north, still be in deployment zone to get anti-fly 2+, which means if you have anti-fly 2 plus, you have a critical wound on a 2 plus against flying units if you're wholly within your deployment zone or if you're within range of an objective marker you control. So if one of the Helverins moves up a little bit, now he has line of sight on that flying unit. And if the Helverin in the south moves forward a little bit, he can be wholly within his deployment zone and still have line of sight against the flyer that just attacked or killed the Valiant. Now, if that flyer is infantry, they can't fire into combat, and the Valiant will have to fall back. If it is a monster, like a demon, or a vehicle unit, like an aircraft, for example. Now, aircraft will not be able to tag the Valiant in melee, but an aircraft unit could still come somewhere in the area behind the Valiant to try to shoot it. So if it's a monster or vehicle unit that appears in this area behind the Valiant towards my deployment zone, both of the Helverins can fire on it using big guns never tire rule with a -1 to hit penalty. That also means the Valiant, if he survives, can fire into combat, and so can the Warglaves. And after that, the Warglaves can just charge the opponent if it still doesn't die, but it should die. Most units should die at that point. So that's how the mid board looks. And we get here to the north side. Now, this area right here is the most dangerous place for the enemy to be due to overlapping firing lanes and overwatch. If the opponent is in this area, he can be hit by both Helverins, he can be hit by the Valiant, the Warglaves, the Rangers in the middle, and the Rangers in the north. And he is within the threat range of the Acheron. The Acheron, being a super heavy walker, can just walk through the ruins and charge the opponent if it's a big target. Or the Acheron can stay in the ruins and fire with his range weapons. So this is the most dangerous place in the map for any opponent to be. Now, the opponent can just rush you with a horde army and have way too many targets for you to shoot at. But the nice thing about Questor Forge Pack is that you get these Skitarii Rangers, and they are 10 models with 18 shots. You can take one plasma gun that has 2 shots. You can take one Transuranic Harquebus, which is that giant anti-tank gun, for 1 shot. You can take an arc rifle, which I believe is 2 shots. And you can have 7 units with rifles. You're probably going to take an Omnispecs, and that guy needs to have one of the standard rifles. And your Alpha, which is kind of like the sergeant, he can either take a pistol or he can take a rifle. If he does take a rifle, then you have 19 shots. If he takes a pistol, he has 18 shots. Well, the whole unit has 18 shots. And you also have a Tech Priest Dominus who has access to a bunch of different loadouts. But these Skitarii Rangers have quite a high volume of shots for shooting at light chaff. And the Valiant has, again, 3d6 shots on his torrent weapon. And he also has a bunch of other small arms fire. The Acheron has his 2d6 torrent weapon as well as his little bolter. So that's a lot of shots to clear out little chaff units. And if a big tank shows up there, something heavy, maybe another knight, the Valiant does have within 18-inch range a Thunder Coil Harpoon, and he has 2 Shield Breaker missile launchers that he can fire. The Warglaves also have melt-a-weapons that have a 24-inch range, and so that's nice as well. So this area here, whatever enemy shows up, whether it's an armored enemy or a chaff unit, they're gonna get destroyed. So it's nice to have overlapping firing lanes. It's nice to have things in the back line like Helverins, especially since Imperial Knights don't have strong indirect fire. It is good to place your units in a way that they can cover other units and double or triple up on firepower because you really want to be killing things, especially things like Necrons, Death Core of Krieg. You want to make sure that you're killing the unit fully and not wounding them. Because if you just plink off a couple models, they're going to come back. Death Core of Krieg actually gets bonuses if you don't kill them. So in a lot of cases, you want to just take things off the board and not just wound things. So it's nice when you have a lot of different units. That way, if your opponent is left on 1 or 2 wounds, you can always plink it off and make sure that they're dead. So now we're going to move to the next slide, which is going to be the deployment. So here we have the deployment map to our previous discussion of how your midboard wants to look. So here I have these green lines, and these green lines create dead zones. So dead zones are areas where on the first turn, the enemy can shoot you from their deployment zone. Generally, you don't want to deploy units in the dead zone, but there is an exception. The Valiant can sit right in the dead zone here, and he can bait the enemy out. He has a 5+ invulnerable save at range, and if you place a Tech Priest close to him, he'll repair up to 3 wounds in the following turn. So if you put the Valiant here and the opponent goes first, then the opponent will have to go to this area, which in the previous slide I showed you is the most dangerous place for the enemy to be due to overlapping firing angles in Overwatch. Well, now there's no Overwatch in the first turn because we don't have any units up the board. But if you put your Valiant out with 28 wounds and 13 toughness with a 5+ invulnerable save, he is probably unlikely to get destroyed on the first turn. And the enemy will be poorly positioned because they will have to expose themselves. And the next turn, they're going to get clapped back. The Valiant has 72 inches on his shield breaker missile launchers. So anything that has enough damage to seriously wound a Valiant is going to be a prime target for the shield breaker missile launchers. If the Valiant can move out 8 inches, advance, and use a stratagem to advance and shoot, an advance can be anywhere from 1 to 6 inches. So his potential threat range is 8 inches plus 6 inches plus 18 inches, 32 inches. He has up to 32 inches threat range on his Thundercoil Harpoon. So you could bait out the enemy if you look at their list and realize that they don't have very strong anti-tank units. If for some reason they're bringing 3 super heavies, maybe you don't want to bait him out and instead put him behind the ruin during deployment. If you see that the enemy has some serious anti-tank, don't bait him out like that. You might still die if they get lucky on rolls. So you can keep him behind the ruin, behind the Skitarii, behind a Warglaive, and he should still have enough movement to get out of the ruins and have some serious mid-board control. So that is a bait strategy you can use towards certain armies. And draw them into an area that you already have pre-planned as a kill zone. So let's do the Helverins now. So in the previous slide, the Helverins have to be, one is a little bit north of the home objective and one is a little bit south. So there are 3 places you can put them. You can put them right behind this ruin because the opponent can't shoot through the ruin typically. You could put him in the bottom ruin, or you could put one of them right on the home objective, a little bit behind of everything else. And the reason you do that is because the Helverins have a 48-inch range, so they don't really have to stage right in the front of the ruin so they can move out. You could keep them a little bit back, and they can still move into the firing lanes that we have determined earlier. And if you put one of the Helverins in the middle, you could even double up on either of the firing lanes. Now, you won't get any protection against deep strike, but most units can't deep strike into your deployment zone on the first or second turn. Most deep striking units can't do that. So you might want to double up on a firing lane, and then by turn 3, that's when most deep striking units can deep strike into your deployment zone, move up and screen. So you can keep one Helverin in the middle and keep another Helverin in the north or the south. So that's Helverin deployment. It's pretty flexible. You have a lot of different options. You can't really screw up with it. If you're off by an inch or two, you're off by an inch or two. It doesn't really matter that much. So now that we got the dead zones marked out and we know from the previous slide what we want to do, we're going to put our unit of Rangers in the south with Scout as close as possible to the edge of the deployment zone. That way they can do their scout move of 6 inches, do their normal move on their turn, and get onto objective and start contesting it with 20 OC. And if they win the objective, they can sticky it and move through the wall or move back or move to the north. Once they sticky it, once you control it, they sticky it until the opponent takes it from you. We want to keep them as close to the edge of the deployment zone as possible that's not in a dead zone. If you accidentally put one of your models into the dead zone and they fire at your unit, if they don't take out your whole unit, you can just remove one of the models in the firing lane of the enemy, and that will prevent you from getting shot any further. So make sure you deploy correctly. If you do screw up, you might lose a couple models, but it's not the end of the world. Just make sure you remove the right models away from the firing lane so you don't keep getting shot at for the rest of the round. Now, in the north, we have the Cerastus Knight Acheron, and we have a unit of Rangers with a Tech Priest Dominus. Now, once you attach a Tech Priest Dominus, the Rangers no longer have Scout 6, and they will not, with their normal move, be able to make it onto that objective marker. So you're gonna have to advance onto that objective marker. And once you're in the ruins, definitely will not be doing any shooting. So you can just advance there, and you don't even have to use advance and shoot. The Acheron basic move of 12 inches allows him to get on the objective and even cross over the ruins. So if you're going second and the opponent puts a lot of units on that objective, your Acheron can go through the wall and hit them with a normal move. You don't even have to advance. But if they keep something a little bit further and you want to start doing damage on the first or second turn, you can always crash him through the wall with his normal move. And then you can advance and shoot if they're a chaff-like unit. Or you can not advance and you can charge instead. So this is not a Lancer. If you advance with a unit, you cannot charge. The stratagem that Quester Forge Pack gives is advance and shoot, not advance and charge. So make sure once you see how the enemy is moving, that you make the right decision. You either advance and shoot, or you do a normal move and charge. So that's our deployment for the north. You keep them close, they're not in any dead zone, and the knight moves on to the objective. The rangers move on to the objective by advancing, and now you have a ton of OC right on that north objective, and the opponent is probably unable to steal it from you unless they're playing guard and they put a bunch of chaff up there and have a commissar or some other officer that gives him bonus OC. Then they could probably steal it from you, but these rangers have 2 OC each, and that Cerastus Knight has 10 OC, I believe. Also, your Tech Priest has OC. So you do have a lot of OC going on to that north objective. And here's one interesting rule that Knights have. Both the Valiant and Acheron have the Towering keyword. The little knights, the Armigers, they don't have that towering keyword. But the big knights, the Cerastus knights, the Dominus knights, and the Questoris knights all have the towering keyword. What that means is that if you're on one side of the ruin, but not inside the ruin, and not towing the ruin, and the opponent is completely on the other side of the ruin, then you can't get shot. But once you tow onto a ruin, you can be shot at and you can shoot across the ruin. Normal units, other than aircraft, can't do that. Normal units, including tanks, have to be fully within a ruin to be able to shoot out of that ruin. But knights don't have to. They can tow onto the ruin and fire on the enemy. So remember that. Once the Acheron gets inside the ruin base, you can get shot at. And you can also shoot at opponents. So now we have the 2 Warglaves. The 2 Warglaves should be out of the dead zone. They are not as durable as your Knight Valiant. So you probably shouldn't be baiting the enemy with the 2 Warglaves that you have. You want to save them so that they don't die. And so you keep them out of the dead zone, and you keep them close enough to the ruin that since they don't have super heavy walker and can't walk through the ruin, they have to go around. So you have to keep them towards the edges of the ruin so that you can move where you need to go without being move blocked by terrain. And these Warglaves and the Helverins both have 12-inch basic move. One thing to note is that the Warglaive, if he does get shot at, does have benefit of cover due to the Valiant's aura, if he is within 6 inches of the Knight Valiant. So when you're moving out, keep that in mind. If he's out in the open and he's not protected by cover, try to keep him within 6 inches of the Knight Valiant so that he can have cover, even if he appears to be out in the open. It's a pretty nice aura to have against enemies that have low armor penetrating attacks. So now we have the Rangers who are going to take the middle. These Rangers have a Tech Priest Dominus linked to them, and so they don't get Scout 6 inches. And they have sticky objectives, so you do want to make sure that at least one unit is towing your home objective. Then you control it, you can move out on your turn, and that home objective is sticky. And what you want to do is string out your Rangers towards the ruin. And you want to put most of your Rangers right at the edge of the ruin so that when it's your turn, whether you go first or you go second, your Rangers are ready to move out. The Tech Priest Dominus gives the Rangers a 5+ feel no pain every single round. Your Rangers have a 5+ invulnerable save. and they are each 1 wound, and the Tech Priest has 4 wounds. That means it's gonna take a lot of small arms fire to get through your Rangers. And if the opponent decide to use heavier weapons, now they're just overkilling and wasting all that damage to take out 1 wound. The reason Rangers are so durable is because of their invulnerable save with their feel no pain, which if you watch one of my other videos talking about the Quester Forge Pack detachment, it gives them a 55% chance to drop any shot that hits and wounds. That's a pretty damn good chance that they're going to survive a lot of things. And so when you deploy him, 1 model towing the home objective and then stringing out your units as strung out as possible and lining the rest of the units up right on that ruin wall, that means that next turn, every single model should be able, with a normal move, to clear that ruin wall and get out in the open. And you're gonna want to advance them so that they get closer to that middle objective. And your Valiant is gonna do the same thing. His normal move of 8 inches should get him out of cover of the ruins, and he should be on his way to capturing that middle objective. One thing that will stop you from doing that will be enemy armies that have infiltrators, scouts, high movement, and they're gonna just rush up that board if they go first and jail you. If you get jailed, meaning they line up a bunch of units right on the opposite side of that ruin so you can't get through it with a normal move, you're gonna be in a very, very bad place. Your Valiant can overwatch them. If he is towing that ruin, at least he can see out of that ruin and he can overwatch them with his flamer. But you really don't want to get to that point. You're wasting a CP when you really didn't have to. You don't want to get to that point. So if the enemy has scout infiltrators and their strategy is to keep you in jail and take that middle objective and hold it, you need to stop that. And in order to stop that, you bring a Calidus Assassin. And the good thing about the Calidus Assassin is that the Calidus Assassin has a lot of nice things. So she has Infiltrator, which means that you can deploy her anywhere on the board at least 9 inches away from the enemy deployment zone and at least 9 inches away from any other deployed unit that the enemy has. So if you get to deploy first and the enemy has scout infiltrators, you park your Calidus Assassin right in the middle of the board, and you see that red circle is a 9-inch radius of where the enemy cannot place one of their units in deployment. If they go first and they're trying to jail you, they got to get through that assassin. And that assassin is a speed bump. It's 100 points, but it's not the assassin that's going to be doing the damage and doing a lot of objective controlling. The assassin's nice for taking secondaries later, but if the enemy is jailing you and controlling the whole board, it's gonna be very hard for you to get those secondaries anyway. So you put the Calidus Assassin right in the middle. If the enemy wants to put an infiltrator nearby, goes first and gets within 12 inches and wants to shoot the Calidus Assassin and kill her, or they want to rush in melee and kill her, they can. But do remember, now they're all out in the open, and when it's your turn, you get to move out and clap them back hard. That's what you want to do. You want to clap them back hard. You got flamers. A lot of infiltrating units are not tanks. A lot of infiltrating units are on the weaker side. So those strength 8 flamers with -1 AP, they're standing right there out in the open. They're asking to get shot. And so you might lose 100 points, but you're going to be trading. You're going to get those 100 points back when you clap back on the enemy that kills the Calidus assassin, and you prevented yourself from being jailed, so you can move out into the middle, advance out into the middle, and set up all your units like I had in the previous slide. Set up that Overwatch threat circle. You can get onto objectives, start taking victory points. You can move your Helverins out into lanes of fire and shoot at whatever enemy expose themselves. So if you go second and the enemy has scout infiltrators, you want to deploy that scout infiltrator as close to the middle as you can. So with this deployment strategy, that's one way how to play. Now, we're going to go to another deployment strategy. Well, another midboard strategy. And this is how the midboard looks if you're playing the opposite strategy. So here, the similarity is that you still keep the Valiant in the middle. You still keep a unit of Rangers with a Dominus in the middle, a Tech Priest Dominus, and you still keep one of the Warglaves nearby your Valiant. But the difference here is instead of your Scout Rangers going to the south, now your Scout Rangers are going to the north. They're gonna Dogbone right on the ruin base, 1 inch away from it, to prevent enemies from attacking you aggressively. And the Rangers in the north have Scout 6, so with their Scout move and their normal move, they should be able to at least touch the objective with a few models and start trying to contest it. The Helverins, they're going to be placed in the exact same place. It doesn't matter. The Calidus assassin, you're going to be doing the same thing with her. And we moved the Tech Priest Dominus, one of the Warglaves, and the Cerastus Knight Acheron to the south. So here it's very similar to the previous map in that we have a danger zone right here. So if the enemy moves into this area here, they're going to get shot at by a lot of different things. And there is a danger zone right here in the south. If they come here, they could get shot at or they could get charged very easily. There's a little bit of difficulty here with this deployment and this strategy. The difficulty here is that the Rangers in the south have no scouts. Since you're bringing a Tech Priest Dominus, they have lost their scouts, and so they have to cross more than 12 inches as fast as possible. So they're not going to be doing a lot of shooting. What I would do is do a normal 6-inch move and advance. If you roll a 6, you're going to get generally to the area you want to be in. If you roll less than a 6, you'll be a little bit closer to where you want to be, but you're not going to be where you want to be. But you have the Knight Acheron that can cross 12 inches with a standard move. They can go through walls. So your Knight is going to rush forward, and your Rangers are going to rush forward as fast as possible. And you're not going to be doing any shooting. There's almost nothing to shoot at. Unless they park in the danger zone in the north, they might be able to fire across the map, but still, I don't think it's worth using them to shoot at anything. That way you save 1 CP and they don't have to advance and shoot. You're probably going to be using that with your Valiant in the middle anyway, because you really want that strong midboard control. But in the south, it's going to take 2 turns. If they make really good advance rolls, they might be able to sticky the objective on turn 1, and by turn 2, they should be able to move through the wall and start threatening their home objective. Your Acheron will definitely be able on the second turn to move with a standard move through the wall and either advance and shoot or just shoot or shoot and charge. You should be able to take a great position on the enemy by turn 2 if they don't screen the south part. If they see a bunch of units in the south and they get scared and they deploy more to the north, then you've got to go as fast as you can, move through this southern ruin, and start assaulting their home objective. That is your strategy. You pile a lot of units down here, they get scared, they deploy to the north. Now you have a bunch of points sitting in the south, and you really need to move it up the board as fast as possible. Now they could use this rear ruin to pile a bunch of tanks behind it and try to oppose you. They could do that. In that case, you have so much OC, you don't even have to cross the wall. As long as you're screening out the enemy from moving through that wall, you have so much objective control on the southern objective that you could just park there, and maybe you could start moving your warglaive up around the wall to start supporting the midboard. Or you can move your Acheron up, maybe towards the north side of the objective marker, and still keep OC there, but create a seriously overlapping threat with the Valiant in the midboard. So you could start your gameplay like that depending how the enemy deploys. Now, if the enemy does decide that the southern objective marker is uncontrollable and they need to focus units, they're like, wow, they only have one Skitarii unit in deployment in the north side, and they decide to park a bunch of units in the north, you move your Valiant up to where his 18 inches of flamer coverage and his Thundercoil Harpoon cover that north objective. That way, if the enemy comes to contest it with a whole bunch of objective control, you can overwatch it, and you're close enough so that if they come with a transport like Hearthkin inside of a Sagittar, or they come Taurox or a Chimera to contest that objective, now you got Thundercoil Harpoons, you got Shield Breaker missile launchers, you got Melta Guns. If you move 6 inches, your Melta Guns have a 12-inch range, so you will be able to hit anything that's towing that north side of that objective. So there's no place the enemy can go where they are safe. The Valiant is right there, overwatching them, and if he doesn't die by the time it's your turn, he's gonna clap him really hard. He's gonna destroy a transport, and when the enemy disembarks from it, now you got another squad of rangers that can shoot in the midboard that can shoot up north. So in this map, if you take that midboard and you have a lot of firing that's pointed toward the north, you don't even have to dedicate a lot of units to the north. You can put one squad of Skitarii Rangers there, and you can just point your guns at the north objective and be like, good luck taking it. You're going to lose a lot of units trying to out OC me. And in the south, you're the one who's doing the out OCing. So it's all about that midboard control. Imagine if you didn't have your Valiant here. Imagine if you got jailed and the enemy had something like a Valiant in the midboard. Now, your whole army in the south is not safe. So if you don't take that midboard, essentially the tables have turned entirely toward the opponent's favor. So you have to take that midboard. And if the opponent gets on that midboard objective and you're not destroyed, you're just a little bit behind in movement, like you've rolled badly on advanced rolls, but you're still past that wall, fight them. Get as close to the enemy as you can. Get right in their face, 1 inch away. Fire all your guns at it. Now you have a guaranteed charge. And why would you charge with a Valiant? You're not charging with the Valiant. You're charging with the Rangers. You're charging with the Rangers so that you can do pile-in moves. If you kill them off, you can consolidate moves. You can get on the objective without getting there in the movement phase. You can still get on the objective in the fighting phase. So if you shoot at opponents sitting on that objective and you manage to get them down to 1 or 2 models, you can move in and have no fear because you have a Tech Priest Dominus. Have no fear. Fight them. Charge in. Pile in. If you can kill them, great. Consolidate and get towards the front of the objective. If there's no opponents on the mid board, there's nothing to charge. Absolutely nothing within 12 inches. Advance. If there's an opponent there and you have a chance to charge, then don't advance with your Rangers. And if they're already on the midboard objective, your Valiant is going to be within range to fire all of its weapons at it without advancing. There's no point in advancing if there's opponents already on the midboard objective. You just make normal moves, and it's actually better and more likely that you will get more range, more movement out of your charge rather than your advance. So if there is an opponent that's gonna be within 12 inches after you've made your normal move, don't advance. Just move out, shoot them, charge. That way, you don't have to spend a CP on advance and shoot, and you might get an average of an extra 3 inches on that charge. Just make sure that with your guns, you take out as many units as possible without fully killing them. You take out as many units as possible so that statistically, whatever's left that you're charging will not be able to clap back after you fight them and completely wipe your Skitarii Rangers unit. So if you've done enough shooting, you could even risk charging a unit that fights first. If they have a fights first unit and they have one model left, your Skitarii Rangers are gonna survive. So charge them. They'll fight first. They'll kill off a couple Rangers. Your Rangers will fight them. Maybe you'll kill them. Maybe it won't. But you're gonna get that extra movement in. And that extra movement will put you on that objective and hopefully have enough OC on that objective so that next turn, when it comes to the next player's scoring phase, they will not get the points for the midboard objective that they thought they were going to get. There is one interesting aspect of using the Knight Valiant. His special ability is that he can choose one target that he has hit with any of his weapons. Most likely, it's going to be your conflagration cannon since it auto hits, but it could be any other weapon that he has fired. If it hit an opponent, you can select it, and it has to take a battle shock test. So if there's a full unit trying to contest any of the objectives that the Valiant has line of sight on, then he can fire at that unit and force it to take a battle shock test. If that unit fails the battle shock test, they are brought down to 0 OC unless it's guard and they have something like a commissar. That means that they are no longer contesting your objective. So, these are two strategies of playing GW Terrain 8. The reason why I chose GW Terrain 8 is I could find it really easily on Google. This is the first map that I found that had deployment areas marked out. It was really simple. And so I chose this map, but there are 8 other maps that you have to prepare on. So what I hope you get from this video is realizing that strategy is really important. And generally, tournaments will tell you what their mission format is. So you can always Google these maps, get these maps into a editing software, and then you can start marking it up by putting firing lanes, by putting dead zones, by putting circles of deep strike protection, and kind of planning out your deployment. That way, when you go to a time tournament with a chess clock on it, you don't have to sit there scratching your head. Oh my God, what am I gonna do? Let me go and use my laser and figure out firing lanes and take my tape measure or my ruler and figure out if the enemy can hit me or not. You don't have to do any of that. You already have it planned out. You just make something like this at minimum with firing lanes and with deep strike screening, print it out. Maybe create a few different options, a few different deployment styles. That way you could tailor your deployment based on how the opponent deploys. So you could do a little bit of that and then just print it out, and that's your cheat sheet. You can just go up there and be like, I know where I'm deploying. All I have to do is measure out exactly where I'm going to place the units and then place the units right there. And you could probably go really quickly and get to 5 battle rounds within 2.5 to 3 hours, whatever your time limit is. And that will make for a more engaging and fun gameplay. You don't have to talk anything out. You can just finish the actual game, score your points, and it's just a lot nicer when you can move things a little bit faster. You already have things planned out. You have a little bit more confidence in the game. You already know what you're getting into. So I hope that that's something that you took away from this video. And other takeaways you could have is seeing how you could play a Quest or Forge Pack list. You can kind of see from this video on the different ranges, the different distances that are on the map. That way you can understand the capabilities that your units have, how fast they can go, what Scout 6 inches can do, what Infiltrate can do, and how big an 18-inch threat range is. It might look small on paper compared to other data sheets that have 48-inch firing ranges, but if you can park an 18-inch threat range unit in the midboard, let's just say you're taking up over a third of the entire board in area if you have an 18-inch threat range and you place him in the middle. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. I hope I inspire you to make your own strategy cheat sheets. And I hope that at least some of you who don't already do this and you're looking into going to tournaments, download some of the maps, try it out with your own armies, and I hope you have fun at your event. This might not be so fun, but the more time you put into preparation, the more fun you're going to have at the event. So anyway, thank you for watching, guys, and tune in for more videos. I'm going to be doing more deep dives on different nights. I'm going to be doing more strategy videos in the future. I'm still going to be playing Warhammer 40k Tacticus to a limited capacity. So there's going to be a lot of different content that will be coming out in my channel. And if you want to see anything, then feel free to like and subscribe and message or comment with the types of content that you'd like to see done. And if you want more feedback from better players and more experienced players and a higher quantity of players, then I highly encourage you to join the Knights Competitive 40K group on Facebook. It's run by Jin Singh. He is a very experienced Knights player, and he could probably tell you about almost every knight out there and about every list out there. So, again, thanks for watching and have a good day. Praise the machine god.